Hi, I'm Chris, the producer of Dying to Tell You, and before we begin, we just wanted to offer a brief warning that today's episode does include discussions of suicide. This is obviously a complicated issue, especially when we are involving end-of-life care, but it is central to today's story. If you or someone you know needs help, please know that help is available by calling the National 988 Crisis Line. You can call or text 988. You can also chat online at 988lifeline.org. Thank you.
Since we started Dying to Tell You over a year ago, I've encountered many healthcare professionals in person and on social media that have listened to the podcast. Often, the story shared on the podcast sparks a memory of a story in their own career that has deeply affected them. As healthcare professionals, our patients are often our greatest teachers. The things we encounter as we care for patients and families from varied backgrounds helps us to expand our minds and breadth of experience, changing the way we practice and sometimes the way we live our lives. I wanted people to have the benefit of hearing some of those life-changing stories, to hear from these people that dedicate their lives to caring for the sick, especially those who care for people at the end of their lives. I wanted Dying to Tell You listeners to hear another perspective. So I've invited some friends to tell some tales about the things they've encountered that have changed their lives. This is Dying to Tell You, the Caring Perspective. All right, welcome to Dying to Tell You, the Caring Perspective. So this is an opportunity for healthcare providers or workers to tell stories about people who they've taken care of, who have come to the end of their life, and what they've learned through that experience. So today I have with me one of my favorite doctors, Dr. Laura Kennedy. So Laura and I have worked together for how many years?
Seven-ish.
Yeah. 7-ish years. Oh yeah, I guess we're coming up on 7 this summer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So Laura and I have worked together in the hospital for about 7 years. So yeah, why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How did you get into palliative care? Maybe we'll start there.
Sure. So in medical school, had the opportunity to rotate with a palliative medicine team at the university where I was studying, and really appreciated their approach, just the way they got to spend time with patients and really get to know patients, really being able to understand what was important to somebody. That really resonated with me. I've always thought that my role as a doctor is to help people live the way they want to live, for as long as they can live. Right. And it felt like a lot of other specialties in medicine didn't always keep track of that part of having patients live the way they wanted to live.
Right.
And so I think that's what first got me interested in it. I did internal medicine residency at University of Colorado and got to rotate with the palliative medicine team there, and was, again, really impressed with the skill and the expertise of those doctors and their communication style. And always loved talking to patients. That was always the best part of my job. And so thought this would be a good thing for me to get to pursue.
Yeah, it is. In so many ways, palliative care, I guess I thought when I was getting into palliative care, because I really didn't know what I was getting into, but when I thought I was getting into end-of-life care. Mm-hmm. But really, I think the longer I'm part of this, specialty, the more I realize it's just good care. It's just good medical care that is, paying attention to who a person is and what's important to them, and then matching the medical care to them. And I don't know, I guess I wish people didn't have to be so sick to get it, All right. So the whole idea is to tell a story about a patient that you had and what you learned from them. So tell me a story.
Yeah. So the story that I'm going to tell happened when I was about a year out of training. I work both in the hospital with Cody, but also in the clinic, seeing patients in the outpatient setting. And in the clinic setting, a lot of what I do is work with patients and the people who care for them, trying to make sure that, just like we were saying, Cody, that we are helping people live the kind of life they want to live, even in the midst of treatment for cancer or other medical conditions. And so a lot of that is symptom management. And this patient, I'll call him Gary, came into the clinic to see me one day to establish with our team. Gary was mid-70s, had just been diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. So this cancer that had started in his lungs had actually spread into some of the lymph nodes up sort of in his shoulder region. And the reason he got diagnosed was because he started having really severe pain in the neck and shoulder on that side. So they did some, workup and discovered that he had these enlarged lymph nodes that were pressing on this big network of nerves that passes through the shoulder there. And so he's met with an oncologist and made a plan for starting treatment, and then came in to see me, largely at first for pain management. He came in with his daughter, Julia, that first day, and she's probably mid-40s. And clearly they have a really special relationship, right? Like, it's clear that she's there, not just as a daughter, but also kind of as a friend, and that they have really been huge supports for each other as they've, grown together over time. So in that first session, really focus was pain management. Gary had already been started on a opioid pain medicine to try to help with that pain. And in spite of that, when he came in, his pain was 9 out of 10. So I made some adjustments. When we're working with these pain medicines, we always have to be thoughtful about side effects. They can make people sleepy. They can make people lose balance. If you really get it wrong, people can even overdose and stop breathing. And so I started what became a very long process of trying to make these adjustments to get his pain under control. Made some initial adjustments, had a nurse check on him, no better. Saw him back in clinic, made some more adjustments, sort of the next step in the protocol for trying to manage pain safely. And, maybe down to a 7 out of 10, but by the next time I saw him, we were right back up to 9 or even 10 out of 10.
Wow.
This went on for a couple of months with me seeing him routinely in clinic and the nurses following up with him, making all of the changes that I'd recommended, and really seeing no pain relief. Through this period, I really saw Gary, who was already, when we started, feeling pretty depressed. This pain was interfering with every aspect of his life.
Right. Yeah.
He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't able to do anything that he wanted to do. It was sort of all consuming. And so when I first met him, he was really feeling down. And I was really hopeful when I first met him and trying to impart hope to him that we'd get him feeling better. But after a couple of months of these sort of stepwise changes and no real improvement in his pain or his function, I could see that he was getting even more discouraged. And so we, kept trying to follow to these sort of next steps, kept checking in with him. Until one day I came into the clinic and I had a notification in my in-basket in the medical record that Gary had died. And this was wholly unexpected. Just because somebody has metastatic cancer doesn't necessarily mean that they're dying right then. And he didn't have any disease that should have been life-threatening. And so I got into his medical record, And I found out that he had died by suicide.
Oh, wow.
And in talking with the nurses on my team who'd reached out to his daughter and to some of the other doctors involved in his care, I learned that he had shot himself in the head in his living room, and that Julia had been the one to find him.
Wow.
And I was just devastated. In this line of work, you can't see death as failure, right? Death is a normal part of life. Lots of my patients die, and typically death doesn't mean that I've missed something or done something wrong. But in this case, Gary's death very much felt like a failure.
Yeah.
I hadn't controlled his pain.
Right. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's obviously tender for you even still. And so early on in your career as a palliative physician, did you talk to his daughter afterwards?
I didn't. And now I think I would have. But at that point, I was worried that it would be more about me than about her.
Yeah, that's really a difficult line to walk, right? I mean, because I guess that it may have been like about you, and also she may have really appreciated that kind of like outreach support. Wow. I don't think I knew this story. I'm surprised. I just kind of expected that I would know the story that you were going to tell. But so, yeah, tell me all the things you learned from that.
Yeah.
Goodness.
There are two things that really sort of stand out as lessons that I learned from that experience. And one is that the stepwise, cautious, by the book approach can actually be riskier than moving quicker and being more willing to take a calculated risk to move faster. And then the other is that I can forgive myself. Even after making an error that had really devastating consequences.
The first thing, I just knowing you, you are very precise and calculated and thorough. And so it doesn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me, I guess. I don't know if this is really true. If the calculated approach, is the thing that feels safest to you. So I'm wondering how that sits with you, this idea that maybe that's not always the best, or can lead to some consequences, unwanted consequences. How does that sit with you? I'm curious. And how does that play out in your, and how do you weigh those things as you're thinking about, okay, now is this a time when I can go by the book, or is this a time when I need to do something different? Like, how do you work that out? How does that sit?
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Like, I am risk averse.
I wasn't going to say it, but you can.
But I can.
Yeah.
And my natural inclination is to be sure before I take a big step. So it's not always easy for me to make the calculated risk and go ahead and decide to act on it. I think the way that this plays out for me clinically is I weight the intolerability of the current state more heavily against the potential or hypothetical risks of moving more quickly. And so if current state is not great, but tolerable, then I keep doing sort of the stepwise approach. If current state is, according to what the patient is telling me, intolerable, and my first go-to step or two maybe that typically work haven't gotten us where we need to be, then I need to pay attention to that. And these hypothetical risks that somebody will have a side effect of these medications can't outweigh the fact that somebody's already living in an intolerable situation.
Yeah. A couple of things. First, I think it's really interesting that this story, this encounter that didn't go how you wanted it to, actually gave you, it seems like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it gave you confidence to be able to do something other than what you normally would have done.
It's interesting. I wouldn't have put it that way. I wouldn't have said it was about confidence, maybe more about counter pressure.
Okay.
I think at this point in my career, with more years of practice under my belt, I am a lot more confident in making those decisions about when to take risks. But that's partly because I've had the experience of now having this other sort of hand on the scale, saying, you really need to be bold in your action here.
Yeah. That sounds like confidence to me. I'm going to die on this hill.
Okay.
No, but being bold, I think that's, there is an element of confidence in that. But I really appreciate that. I want to go back to your second thing about being able to forgive yourself, even you said after an error. Do you see this as an error?
I see it as an error in judgment. I do. I think if I had seen Gary now instead of when I was so early in my practice, I think I would have been more aggressive in my steps. And I don't know, that doesn't guarantee that the outcome would have been different.
Right.
But I do think that the slow and steady approach was clearly not the right approach in this case. And that if I had known to try something else, it's possible that he would have had his pain controlled better. And I really do think that was the crux for him. Hard to say. I wasn't inside of his head.
Obviously.
But I think that if I had been able to find some way to control pain, that would have been that has the potential to have really changed things for him.
What I appreciate about that so much is there's just not enough people, and it's just not prevalent enough for people to do something, be able to say, that wasn't the best. That was an error, and then learn from it to go, oh, I got new data. And I can incorporate that into who I am and how I practice, and I'm going to change. And just the ability to admit that something was wrong or an error is something I value a lot and don't do enough of. And that people also don't do enough of that. I mean, just generally. And yeah, can we get more of that around? Just saying, oh, I messed up. I'm going to do something different next time. Why is that so hard? But for so many of us, it's really difficult. So thank you so much for the vulnerability of sharing that with, whoever is going to listen to this. But more importantly, for doing that for your patients, because it makes you a better doctor, and it makes for better care for your patients down the road. So thank you for sharing all that.
You're welcome. I mean, I think for me, that's a necessary next step to acknowledging that I made an error. This was really, it was devastating for me.
I'm sure.
And the things that helped me were, I don't remember who, but somebody on our team knew that one of the other docs in our group had a patient die by suicide, and encouraged me to reach out to her. And I did. And she took time out of her day to listen to me, to share her story. And that was hugely helpful to have this doctor further along in her career, who I really respected, make me feel less alone in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other piece that was really important for me in being able to forgive myself was thinking about, well, how do I make meaning out of this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we talk about with our patients all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's the beautiful alchemy of taking something that is not so great and transforming it into something that will make you better, or finding some sort of redeeming value in the thing that is not so great. We talk about it with cancer or other diseases with our patients, but the same kind of thing with ourselves. Yeah. That's so great. I mean, sorry for the story. It's obviously a devastating story, and obviously very hard for you, but the transformation of that, and I hope that people hear this and just recognize how much it means to their physicians how they're doing. I mean, maybe not every physician, but the ones that I know, they really care about their patients, and it's so great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to tell us about?
I think just knowing that this is probably a platform that other caregivers listen to, I think it's really important for us to recognize how high risk our patients are actually for death by suicide. That was part of my meaning making, was working with a psychiatrist and a therapist within my organization to learn more about risk of suicide in patients with terminal illness. And I was able to have a therapist come and present to our department about risk of suicide in patients with terminal illness and how to screen for it, the risk factors for it. And in looking back, Gary had so many of the risk factors. He was older, he was white, he was male, he was not married. He had a terminal illness. He had terrible pain. He had guns in the home. There were so many red flags that I didn't even know to recognize. And so I guess that's the other thing I would say is that our patients are at risk for death, not just from their illness, but from depression and hopelessness. And that's important for us to keep in mind and to make sure that we are addressing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. I don't guess I'd really thought about it. I don't do, I'm always
it doesn't happen as much in the inpatient
setting. But it's a really interesting point. Yeah. Cool. Great. Well, thank you very much, Laura, for joining us on the Dying to Tell You the Caring Perspective. I hope to work with you many more years.
Thank you, Cody. Yes, it's been a pleasure. And I also hope to work with you for many more years.
Hooray. All right. Adios.
Adios.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing such a poignant and touching story. I so appreciate your vulnerability and honesty, as well as your ability to process such a story and turn it into a learning opportunity. Laura is one of my favorite people to work with. For those of you who are listening, this kind of thoughtful, honest reflection is typical with Laura. It's contagious. It inspires those of us who work with her to be better people and better clinicians. And I hope it's inspired you as well. Thank you for listening to The Caring Perspective. Season 3 of Dying to Tell You is well underway. We have several excellent interviews of people living with serious illness already recorded, but we're always looking for more. So if you or a loved one is living with a life-limiting illness, you do have a story to tell. Let's tell that story together. Go to our website, dttypodcast.com, and click the Share Your Story link to get started. Remember, you can watch all episodes of The Caring Perspective on YouTube, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have more guests coming each week with thoughtful stories of hope and learning at the end of life. Thanks again for listening. This is Dying to Tell You, The Caring Perspective.